In 2015, after some time working with 3 crossfader and a judging system at different events, we started sketching on ideas working with more possibilities than just 3 criteria. In 2016, we created the first mind maps on a tentative holistic model with 6 criteria. By getting deeper into the main idea of the mind, body and soul as the feedback loop of the system, we also researched in realms that don't necessarily have to do directly with dancing. Then, at some moment in 2016, we called our system the Trivium. The term Trivium is derived from medieval Latin and was intended to mean a place where 3 roads meet. It later was used to describe the study of grammar, rhetoric and logic, conceptually analogous to the 3-part mind, body and soul. The Trivium value system is a holistic judging model in which all its criteria interlink with one another. The whole is always more than the sum of its parts. As such, the judges need to look at the full performance with all of its content, its aspects and how it unfolds. The criteria and the hierarchy. The best way to display the thought process underlying the Trivium value system is by creating a triangle. In each of the 3 corners, there is an upsized qualitative criterion. Artistic quality for the mind, physical quality for the body, and interpretative quality for the soul. Each of these 3 qualitative criterions are in turn divided into 2 subcategories with the Trivium. All criteria interlink with and influence one another and are represented as follows. Technique. Its values are aptitude and athleticism. Judges should compare competitors' competence and take into consideration how effectively they utilize their physiological attributes to their advantage, which means both elevating physiological advantages to higher levels of ability and turning possible disadvantages into benefits. Dexterity, fine motor control. Judges should compare competitors' competence and take into consideration their mastery of detailed movement in an effortless and light manner, whilst maintaining purpose and conviction. Pushing the body to the limit. Judges should compare competitors' competence and take into account the risks and difficulties involved when dancers make movements at the extreme ranges of human ability. Balance. Judges should compare competitors' competence and take into account their ability to maintain their center of gravity with minimal postural sway and pay attention to how changes in velocity significantly affect the equilibrium. Strength and endurance. Judges should compare competitors' competence and take into consideration their mastery of core strength to manage the forces applied on the body, as well as explosive strength in the extremities. Attention should also be directed to how well they manage to avoid displaying muscle fatigue in their movement. Dynamics. Judges should compare competitors' competence and take into consideration the use of contrast in direction, rotation, speed, shape, etc., and how it's implemented in their movements. Spatial control. Judges should compare competitors' competence and take into consideration their ability to master the orientation and position of their body, both internally and externally, to the environment. Variety. It is desirable that competitors demonstrate a diverse range of movements throughout the competition with minimal repetition. Dimension. Judges should compare competitors' competence and take into consideration their ability to master the execution of the range of various movements internal to the dancer in relation to their movement within and across multiple axes. Empathetic approach. In order for judges to recognize movements as being repeated or diverse, it is important for them to have a true appreciation of the gradations that define movements as similar or different. By having a personal understanding of the challenges faced when executing particular movements, they will be better placed to be able to contextualize movements as appropriately repeated or unique and compare the competitors' competences accordingly. Performativity. Its values are composition and narrative. Judges should compare competitors' competence and take into consideration how well structured their combination of movements are put together and how well understood and contextualized their narratives are. This must also be clearly communicated to viewers. The element of surprise. Judges should compare competitors' competence and pay attention to unforeseen and unanticipated movements that invoke a feeling of amazement in the viewers. Emotional engagement. Judges should compare competitors' competence and pay attention to how accomplished and invested they are portraying the character they are performing and how comprehensively viewers are drawn into and captivated by the performance. Authenticity. Judges should compare competitors' competence and pay attention to how credible they appear to them and how genuine and sincere their performance appears. Musicality. Its values are coherence. Judges should compare competitors' competence in their synchronicity of movement with the pulse of the music. Accenting. Judges should compare competitors' competence in their visual emphasis and enunciation of movement that follows the time signature of the music. Syncopation. Judges should compare competitors' competence in the visual emphasis of the unaccented beats, whilst maintaining articulation with the music. Texture. Judges should compare competitors' competence in their expression of and feel for the music, linking the quality of movement with the dynamics and nature of the music. Phrasing. Judges should compare competitors' competence in the cyclical nature of the dancer's movements, compatible with the musical rules of the song that is playing. Personality, and its values are stage presence and charisma. Judges should compare competitors' competence in their ability to project their energy outwards. Confidence should be displayed, compelling and commanding the viewer to remain engaged with the performance. Individuality and character. Judges should compare competitors' ability to convey and highlight a sense of unique style and distinguished identity. Once this is established, it provides a baseline to evaluate related areas such as stage presence, character, and performativity. No matter how physically demanding the competitor's movements may be, they should remain in character. Creativity. The main value lies in the progression of the fundamentals of foundation. Judges should compare competitors' ability to develop new concepts and novel movements. In order to do this, it is important to first establish a defined baseline regarding the term fundamentals of foundation, to then be able to make meaningful observations regarding progress. For us, fundamentals of foundation are defined as a framework for the underlying concepts, structure, and composition of how a dance form is governed. This requires a comprehensive understanding around body mechanics together with cultural and philosophical developments in relation to the dance style. Judges should consider how far competitors have advanced pre-existing ideas and concepts not only within the framework of the dance, but also with respect, innovation. In other words, has the performance been so significant as to expand previous parameters, redefining past norms? It is important to note that a judge can only make comparisons from what he or she knows at that particular moment in time, which can result in changes of perspective following the assimilation of new information. For each of these 6 criteria, the judges have an allocated fader on the handheld Trivium device. Each fader represents the criterion's weighting in the matrix. All faders, when summed up, add up to 100% in value. During and immediately after each round of a battle, the judge can adjust these faders according to what the judge saw during the performances. There are also a number of values that do not fit neatly within one specific criterion and have been identified as affecting various combinations of criteria. They are overlapping values. So, in addition to the faders that require a quick but steady touch by the judges, we installed a few buttons that are directly connected to the corresponding faders. They enable the judge to react quickly to some key moments in the battle. There are shortcut buttons for form, which affects both technique and performativity, where the judges should value competitors' ability to maintain clear and deliberate shapes, both in their core and extremities. Execution, which affects both technique and performativity, and where the judges should value competitors' ability to complete the entirety of their intended movements with purpose and clarity. Confidence, which affects both performativity and personality. The judges should value competitors' ability to perform assertively with belief and conviction. Spontaneity, which affects performativity and creativity, and which judges use to value competitors' ability to adapt and innovate in the moment to enhance their performance. Repeat, which affects variety and creativity. judges should value competitors' ability to demonstrate a diverse range of movements throughout the competition with minimal repetition. This applies throughout the competition, starting from the first round to the final. And bite, which affects variety, creativity, and personality. A bite is a phrase or a set of moves, or a combination of moves taken from another dancer. It is important to note that there is an academic distinction between a competitor knowingly claiming, under false pretenses, that a movement is a product of his or her own creation, and hence taking credit for someone else's achievements, versus a competitor unknowingly using a movement that has been widely accepted to have been created by another dancer. However, in practice, judges can only read to what is observed, given that true ownership of a movement is difficult to ascertain. Elements copied from another breaker should be penalized. Then we also have buttons for a crash, which affects all criteria. A crash is a non-intentional, accidental movement. It is divided into 3 degrees of severity. The slip, which is a minor error, the fault, which is a moderate error, and a wipeout crash. If a contestant crashes, this will have negative consequences on all aspects of his performance. Instead of manipulating each of the 6 faders, which would take a lot of time and concentration, the crash button will be pressed and all faders will be moved at once to a negative for the crashing contestant. And misbehavior. This value affects performativity, creativity, and personality criteria. Breakers should not act in a manner which will bring the dance into disrepute. They should refrain from overtly obscene, lewd, rude, racial, abusive, discriminative, sexual, or violent gestures or acts. In particular, misbehavior involving physical contact is divided into 3 degrees of severity: mild, moderate, and severe. Here's an example on how the Trivium Interface of N8 looks like. With a little bit of practice for an intuitive touch, we realized that the use of the Trivium on a handheld is not much different than a game controller. The Trivium was chosen as the judging tool for the Youth Olympics in 2018. Until now, the Trivium was tested at 38 events. Here's a list of judges that work with the Trivium of 6 faders. Here's a list of judges that have tested and worked with the version of the Trivium with 3 faders. The beauty in judging holistically is that with any 2 performances that are compared directly, the judges only need to wait for a few catalysts to react on. The key way to judge on many criteria is to use these impulses and react by moving at least one of the crossfaders a millimeter to either side, which should display the created imbalances in the performances. The decision creates direct feedback for the audience to see who won, for the dancers to know what they can improve on, for the promoters to find out who can judge, for the culture to find out what needs to change.